Hello and welcome. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bruce Barnum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the CCLP 2021 Legislative Preview. This is our first session of 4 today on 4 different topics, our policy-focused topics. I'm here just to give you some logistics and make the initial introduction, and then we'll get started. We've got an action-packed half hour ahead of you. First of all, if you wouldn't mind, as a way of just introducing ourselves, please put your name and your organization in the chat box, either right now or as you join, and that'll just kind of tell us who's here. Good way of saying hello to everybody without going around and doing introductions, which we're not able to do on a webinar. And then when you have questions throughout the presentation for any of our presenters, you can add them at any time. Go ahead and use the Q&A box. So at the bottom of the webinar, you'll see both that chat box and then also the Q&A box as well. Please use that Q&A box for questions. We'll accumulate them there, and then we'll have time at the end for those questions. We'll try to get through all of them if we possibly can. So please put questions in the Q&A box, your name and organization in the chat box. And then also remember, all of the sessions will be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel. So if you miss any part of it, you want to go back and see some more, you want to share it with your friends, please do so. We'll make them available within a few days on the YouTube channel. So today at this session, you're going to hear from, first of all, Tiffani Lennon, our Executive Director, some opening remarks, and then the main presentation will be from both Charlie Brennan, our Deputy Director of Research, and also our Legislative Director, Chaer Robert. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Tiffani Lennon for her opening remarks. Tiffani, take it away.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the work you do on behalf of CCLP. So as Bruce said, I'm Tiffani Lennon. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Center on Law and Policy. I'm here to welcome you to CCLP's 2021 Legislative Preview. I'm so very proud and honored to be part of the CCLP team. In less than 48 hours, this event sold out. However, it is being recorded, so feel free to share the video link with your colleagues who were unable to attend this live event. Before I address our legislative priorities and turn it over to our talented staff, I would be remiss not to acknowledge yesterday's debacle at the nation's capital. Hundreds, some accounts indicate thousands, of white supremacists violently and unlawfully stormed and defaced the nation's capital. As of 10 p.m. last night, DC police arrested only 52 of these terrorists for various unlawful actions. Compare the 52 arrested yesterday with the 430 arrested in DC on May 30th during the largely peaceful George Floyd protests. Compare the police presence for the George Floyd protests with the police presence yesterday. There's no comparison. Sadly, I do not think we have to wonder what would have happened if these terrorists were Black or brown. There would have been many more killed, many more arrests. Some of you stayed up late watching the news. You're tired, angry, disheartened, and saddened. As you listen to today's program, I'm asking you to bring what you are feeling here to Colorado, to what is before us. You will hear CCLP's Deputy Director, Charlie Brennan, discuss Colorado's employment data, pre and post-COVID. Communities of color continue to be hardest hit. The data underscores that it is imperative that we offer solutions that help workers earning low wages access food, healthcare, and housing. It underscores that we must pierce the structural barriers that have perpetuated racism and poverty. During the preview, we will discuss legislation that seeks to reduce barriers for work and access to healthcare. Later in the day, you will also hear strategies to stem the food and housing crises. Supplemental income, or UBI, for low-wage workers is essential for an economy like ours. Universal benefits should also be on the table. Together, we must reach higher, think bigger, and reimagine what is possible in Colorado. But we need a collective plan of action to advance race equity and to stem poverty. This has been our call, and in 2021, we must begin to make it happen. We have an opportunity before us. Now, I would like to introduce Charlie Brennan. Charlie is our Deputy Director of Research. He's a seasoned researcher. He received his advanced degree from Harvard University in urban planning. Charlie's background in urban planning gives him a particular insight into the interconnectedness of housing, health, and income. His training in geographic information systems helps us in Colorado to better understand the vastly different regions. These are just two reasons why his research in the state of work in Colorado is particularly powerful. Charlie, it is my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. So I just wanted to start out today's presentation with a brief overview, as Tiffany mentioned, of how employment has changed over the course of the past year. Employment is the largest source of income for many Coloradans, and so changes in employment have drastic impacts on Coloradans' ability to earn income. So as we can see, just looking back even 20 years, we really see in sharp contrast just how unprecedented and quickly the losses that we experienced were this year. You can see, during past recessions in 2001 and the Great Recession, employment losses happened slowly over a period of years rather than a period of months, as occurred in 2020. Next slide. If we look at month-to-month changes in employment, we can really see just how unprecedented the changes actually were. So, between the months of March and April, we lost in our state over 340,000 jobs. We've gained back and seen pretty strong job growth and recovery during the months between May and November. However, we have seen over that period of time the economic recovery appearing to slow, even sort of losing steam in the months leading up to November, and then actually seeing a loss of around 7,000 jobs. At least preliminary estimates indicate we lost that many jobs in the month of November. Next slide. So we can see too that the impacts were not felt equally across all sectors. Particularly hard hit were the accommodation and food services sectors. The solid red bars on the chart indicate employment as of February, and gold bars, or excuse me, employment as of April, and the gold bars on the chart represent jobs gained between April and November. And so we can see that majority of the jobs gained in our state have been in that accommodation food services sector, although there's still a ways to go. On the other hand, some sectors have actually continued to see job losses. The government sector is one such sector, has lost 23,000 jobs over that since April, primarily in state and local governments. Next slide. The impacts of job losses were not felt equally across wage levels. This was particularly true for low-wage workers. If we look at low wage, the level of employment among low wage workers compared to January 14th, as of October 15th, it was just about 17%, close to 18% below where it was at the beginning of the year. In contrast, high wage jobs are only 0.2% below, more or less recovered where they were as of January. Next slide. So another indicator of employment health that can be more real time than some of the other government indicators is the number of people applying for unemployment insurance. And so we can see, again, as with employment, there was a tremendous, change at the beginning of the 2020, a huge spike in folks applying for unemployment insurance claims, unprecedented, even during the Great Recession, we came nowhere even close to this level of folks applying. And while it's gone down over the course of 2020, the last couple of weeks have actually seen an uptick in folks applying for unemployment insurance. Next slide. And then just finally, last slide here, looking at the number of people who are either currently receiving unemployment insurance or waiting for approval, so they filed an initial claim. This is for all of the unemployment insurance programs that are available. The red bars show just regular unemployment insurance, which again we can sort of see there was a decrease from a peak from the spring, but however we've sort of ticked back up in terms of folks on regular unemployment insurance over the course of the end of November and beginning of December. As well, the gold and blue bars represent folks enrolled in PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, and then PEUC, which PUA provided unemployment insurance benefits to Coloradans who are normally not eligible for regular unemployment insurance. So these are people who are self-employed or gig workers. PEUC provided extended benefits, so an additional 13 weeks beyond the 26 weeks provided in normal state unemployment insurance programs. These were both part of the CARES Act, and luckily they were extended as part of the latest stimulus measure that was passed by Congress. Otherwise, they would have expired at the end of last year, at the end of 2020, and it would have left, hundreds of thousands of Coloradans without a source of income. So, we're thankful that those did pass and were renewed for at least the next few months. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chaer Robert, our legislative director, who's going to lead us through some of the legislation that we worked on as part of the special session, as well as our plans for this upcoming session. Thank you. Chaer,
thank you, Charlie. And again, I'm Chaer Robert, the legislative director. Just for a bit of, I guess, the timeline of things. Well, by constitution, our legislature can only meet for 180 days per year. And last year, they found out that they actually didn't need to be 120 consecutive days. There was a court ruling on that. And so last year, the legislature did adjourn mid-session because of the pandemic, and then came back later to finish their business. We actually are expecting a similar scenario for next year, where the legislature will convene January 13th, but only for a very short period of time, probably a matter of a day or a few days. To swear in, they need to swear in the newly elected legislators and do just some very preliminary business. And then it's assumed that we will then take a break. The target date is February 16th to pick up and continue with the rest of session. So we did set the date for this a little earlier. But we will have that gap of about an extra month, at least by today's projection, depending on what all happens with the virus, before coming back for the full session. To attend to the emergency situation, particularly prior to the congressional action, there was a 3-day session at the end of November and beginning of December. Some emergency action because things were so dire and Congress, although expected to act, had not yet acted. So during the special session, there were about 38 bills introduced and about 10 passed. We took positions on 5 bills. They're listed here on your slide. So on the top part of that slide, there was Senate Bill 2, which directed $60 million in housing relief. That is both to tenants, to landlords who may not have been able to collect rent, and to homeowners facing foreclosure. It also included money for eviction legal defense to represent tenants in danger of being evicted. In this afternoon's housing session, they will go into greater depth on Senate Bill 2. There also was $5 million approved for energy assistance that will go through Energy Outreach Colorado. Basically, so many more people are in need and have been asking for help. This extra $5 million will supplement just the normal energy outreach assistance program. House Bill 1002. This effort was led by the Colorado Children's Campaign. Our child care sector is in deep trouble. It was always fragile in terms of the economics of it. But then when child care centers, many of them closed and they had to institute social distancing, et cetera. Many have closed and many others were in danger of closing. Senate Bill 1002 provides $45 million for 2 different efforts. One is to keep child care centers that are open operating. The other is to create additional child care slots. The next one, House Bill 1003, provides an extra $5 million to assist food pantries. There was a new grant program set up last year, Just puts more money into that grant pipeline to help food pantries deal with the overwhelming demand for their services. We did oppose one bill, and it was a bill to roll back a bill that we had worked on with the Colorado Fiscal Institute last year that expanded the state earned income tax credit to include ITIN filers without a social security number. And it also will be increasing the state earned income tax credit from a value of 10% of the federal earned income tax credit to 15% of the federal earned income tax credit. That bill did die quickly, but it is possible we may see similar efforts in the upcoming session. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So at CCLP, to try to help us organize our work and make it more comprehensible, we talk about kind of the four issues or four bucket of issues: income, health, housing, and food. But sometimes the what is income is a little unclear, or actually I would say that when we think of income, we think of it rather broadly. I listed first what is the primary source of income for most people, which is jobs. And so we do have a coalition. We coordinate the Skills to Compete Coalition that looks at how do people acquire the training they need to get stable wages. This will be particularly important when so many people have lost their jobs. And more importantly, we've had over a net loss of jobs of over 120,000. So there aren't really jobs to go back to for everyone. And since the people who lost their jobs on a lower educational attainment level, many will need some kind of retraining to take the jobs that actually are in demand and are out there. The next source of income, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to until last year because so few people in Colorado claimed unemployment insurance. But certainly as Charles showed, this past year, unemployment, it has been a crash course in learning about unemployment insurance because it has been a major lifeline for hundreds of thousands of Coloradoans and will continue to be. It did just, the different programs on the slide did just get extended until mid-March, and there may or may not be action after that to continue the extension. Unemployment insurance is now a very important piece of that income puzzle. Tax policy also relates to income. Depending on what tax policies Colorado adopts can affect how much income Coloradoans have. So we have worked on kind of the working family type tax credits, the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, child care tax credit, with a coalition that is led by the Colorado Fiscal Institute. An often forgotten source of income is child support. For many families, that is what lifts them above the poverty level, is child support received. I do serve on the State Child Support Commission, and we are constantly looking at legislative changes to improve support collection system. The next are public assistance programs, and that's probably what people think of most when they think of CCLP, is our long history of dealing with the public assistance programs. Childcare, it doesn't necessarily quite fit any of our other categories neatly. We kind of group it with income because families are in order, and because for so many families, it's their biggest expense or their second biggest expense next to mortgage. We do respect the leadership of the Children's Campaign on a lot of the childcare issues. And then the last one is the one I want to spend a minute on because we are co-leading the effort to renew the necessary documents program in conjunction with Metro Caring. In 2015, we were able to get a state budget amendment to $300,000 a year to pay for people getting copies of documents like birth certificates, marriage certificates, naturalization certificates, that kind of thing. And then in 2016, it was created by legislation which sunsets this year. So we have legislation to renew that program this year. And I'm going to drop into the chat box a link to the fact sheet on that bill. We would love to have more organizations sign on in endorsement to this bill. It is really if you are lacking an ID, if your ID has been stolen, or if you lost it in a fire, or you fled you misplaced that, or you've been the victim of violence, it's often hard to move on with your life if you don't have the ability to prove who you are in order to get a job, in order to cash a check, in order to get medical services, in order to rent housing. Having an official ID is kind of the first step in getting on with your life. Next slide. In terms of challenges and opportunities, certainly the biggest challenge, and I think we're all somewhat in denial about how huge this challenge is kind of the breadth of the financial devastation for just innumerable sectors of the population, and many people. There are many people whose income has not gone down, where they've been able to work from home, maintain full hours. There are a lot of people who have lost their jobs. Some have lost businesses. Some cannot work. And the needs are really astronomical. It plays out on our televisions, particularly in the need for food, but because it's so visual and immediate. But there are financial devastation everywhere, and Colorado only has very limited resources to deal with all of the needs. And there will be competition for what's the most strategic use of Colorado dollars. We at CCLP are particularly looking at the equity implications of how we, Colorado, choose to leverage the limited resources that we do have, in terms of who gets help. Is it just whoever has the best lobbyists, or is it really reflective of the need? The other huge challenge, we have had really a very skeletal system of training workers. In Colorado, we're known for recruiting people from other states who have degrees and credentials, and not doing as good of a job on training our own people for educational attainment. But we will have an awful lot of people who really need to be retrained so that they can have employment in the future. Part of that training includes, being able to master the digital world, something I think we all are still working on. In terms of opportunities, one of the opportunities is there are things that had to be done because of the pandemic, necessity being the mother of invention, that actually reduced the administrative burden on people seeking assistance as well as provide assistance. I'm thinking of things like remote interviews rather than having to do face-to-face interviews, that kind of thing. And there should be an opportunity to streamline the process of trying to get help from the government. There also is an opportunity and a new recognition on the importance of educational opportunities for people of all ages and all sectors, and including universal digital literacy and access. I think that was the last slide. And so that concludes my presentation, but I think we're gonna move into the Q&A period.
Yeah, for anybody that has a question, go ahead and use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can pull that up and just type your question right in there, and we will direct those to the appropriate person. You can ask a question for Char, or you can ask a question for Charlie, or you can ask a question just in general, and we will figure out how to best answer it for you. We don't have any so far. Okay, here we go. A couple are coming in. All right, first question I'm seeing here from Megan. Does CCLP already have bill sponsors and bills in motion for these specific actions? Can we collaborate to learn who is doing what and how can we help?
Yeah, I would say that for one, on the necessary documents bill, we do have sponsors. Senator Moreno and Representative Esgar are our sponsors. And in general, there are, what we do is we work with a number of coalitions. And so there isn't like one particular group that coordinates everything. There isn't like a committee that secretly runs the world. It is very, I guess we delegate it. So for example, that you'll hear this afternoon about renters issues. There's a renters roundtable for tax policy, the EITC coalition that led this as a coalition. The Children's Campaign hosts regular, I think they're still weekly, kind of open policy discussions on childcare. For people interested in the ID bill, if they just let me know, then I can add them to our email list. So I would say in general that it tends to be a coalition effort. And depending on which issue you're the most interested in, we can connect you with whoever leadership that coalition. And for the ID bill, it would be me that you would contact.
Thank you for that question, Megan. Yeah, and it's always a great idea to sign up for CCLP's email newsletter. It's a great way to stay in touch, stay informed as to what's going on and what efforts are happening. And then certainly you can contact Char for anything legislative, as you heard. And then if you stay up to date with our progress, you can perhaps contact other staff members as well who will be happy to connect you. All right, next question I have is from Natasha. And that is, how long do you think it will take for the economy to recover after the pandemic is over? I don't know if Charlie, you want to answer that one, since I'm sure you know.
No, well, I don't think anyone knows. And I think that's part of the challenge, of course, always with, economic recessions and recoveries, is that it's a little bit uncertain as to what's going to happen. I think, bottom line for Colorado, I think our economy won't even begin to recover fully until we have widespread adoption of a vaccine or some other way to manage the coronavirus or the spread of the coronavirus and be able to lift some of the more restrictive public health orders that are in place. And so until that happens, so that might not happen until June, let's say. And then, I think what we learned from the governor's office and then the state legislative council and their projections for the state budget is that, we won't see, a recovery, at least of revenue, until the next couple of years. And so, we'll still be feeling the impact for a while. If we look back to past recessions, which, this one's a little bit different, but those took about 50 to 60 months in total to recover all the jobs that were lost. And so if this recession is anything like that, we've still got a couple of years to go until we're fully back to where we were prior to this. So it could be, a long time. It could be really quickly. Who knows what will happen after, the vaccine is more widely distributed, but that's our best guess.
I think there's also some variation by sector, kind of related to the slide Charlie did, where even though we may ultimately have recovery in most sectors, that there may be pieces of our economy that are permanently changed. I'm thinking of things like business travel, you know, that there may be some more permanent changes in our economy. We're thinking about.
Yeah, that certainly happened after the Great Recession, where certain sectors, you know, even as of 2018, hadn't recovered fully the jobs that they had lost during the Great Recession. And so, I think that's a great point, Char, that it's probably really likely, particularly in some of the harder hit sectors, that we'll see more permanent job losses or job recovery that will take a lot longer than for the economy as a whole.
That's great. Thank you, Charlie and Char, and thank you for the question, Natasha. All right, so next question I have is from Ashley, and she's asking, will these bills have anti-immigration or lawful U.S. presence language?
We at CCLP been kind of taking the initiative on trying to be more inclusive regarding immigration status. And I'm thinking in particular last year, we worked on the bill, I want to say 217, but I could be wrong, that expanded some health insurance to folks who did not have documentation. Oops, Senate Bill 215, thank you. To folks who did not have a social security number. And likewise, the bill on the EITC to add ITIN filers who don't have social security numbers, who are also low-wage workers, to ITIN. And I know Allison's been working hard on, in the housing bill that passed in special session, there was 5 million particularly designated to people who did not qualify for the federal aid. And one of the big reasons they might not qualify is because of their immigration status. So it is something that we are actively working on in kind of our overall approach to.
You cut out just a little bit at the very end there, Char, but I think we got the gist. All right, thank you, Ashley, for that question. We really appreciate it. And then I have one more question here from Paula Schreifer. Hi, Paula. And she asks, to what extent can the new initiatives be paid for out of federal funds, and to what extent will they rely on state funds?
Well, Colorado's philosophy is never spend a state dollar if you can spend a federal dollar instead. So I would expect that we would continue that philosophy of first you spend the federal dollars, and then only if there's no other choice do you spend a state dollar, because state dollars are by the federal government. We cannot print money. We cannot, create more money than there is. We have to balance a budget. And so I think, in particular, actually related to the last question on immigration status, a lot of times the federal government excludes people based on immigration status. So the state picks up 100% if we're trying to help folks with who don't have social security numbers. The state always looks first to, is there a federal dollar out there that we can pay for this with? All
right, great. Okay, well, seeing no further questions, thank you all for those questions. They're great questions. Really added some additional depth to the presentation. And thank you, Char and Charlie, for answering those. Char and Charlie are also happy to answer your questions offline after the presentation. Feel free to email them or get in touch. We are definitely here as a resource for you and for the community, so don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for some closing thoughts and a preview of what's yet to come today from our Executive Director, Tiffani Lennon. Once again, Tiffani.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charlie and Char. We have more. We'll be discussing food security. At 2 p.m., we will address our health priorities for this legislative session. We then will tune back in at 4 p.m. for a housing discussion. I'm so delighted that we have a couple of partners joining us in this discussion and leading this discussion, Clayton Early Learning Center, and in addition, 9 to 5 Colorado. So stay tuned, please, and join us again at noon. More to come. We're looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone.